Good morning, everyone. Thanks for your time and for your attention to us once again. We're always here trying to open the screen with everybody, trying to bring nice information to everyone, but we know it's always a busy day for most of us. So this time I would like to welcome and once again thank English UK for the great long time partnership with Belta. Um, we were just discussing just before we started here who has been longer involved with the association, Mariglan or Ross with English UK. So it's like a personal competition they have over the years, you know. So, anyways, as we all know, the UK has always been a, let's say, top five destination for Brazilian students. You know, we have seen in our market survey as a top two and also top three this year, last year for Brazilian students. Brazil has become a very important sending country to the UK over the years. And the more we know about it and the more we share data about what's going on in the market, I know it brings value information for our daily lives here in the agency. So it's good to bring something so organized and so professional from English UK to all of us here at Belta. For you who are here today with us, you can make your questions whenever you Roz lets you speak, if she may. Uh, and then for some of you who are not able to be with us this morning, you know, we're recording this session and we're going to share this with everybody after the presentation. So thank you once again for being here. Thank you, Ross, Nadia from English UK. Ross, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. So today we're going to run through a few topics, mostly about the statistics, but I'll give a quick introduction and reminder about what English UK is, look at the global perspective for the outbound ELT market, focusing on Brazil, and then Nadia's going to take over. She's our compliance manager. She's been with English UK for 20 plus years as well. But one of the areas she looks after is sort of visas and sort of the accreditation side. So she'll give a quick update and take any questions. And then we'll show you, give you information on a few things that are coming up in the future that might be of relevance. So, what is English UK? I could ask you guys, but I'll zoom straight in. So, we are the trade association for accredited English language centres in the UK. So, our focus is just on English language. We have a similar role to the other trade associations such as Languages Canada, English Education Ireland, English Australia. We're the longest established and one of the largest, and as such, have become sort of a benchmark for the other associations. We are a member of Gala, the equivalent of Belta is a member of, and we've collaborated together for many years. English UK itself has over 300 member centres in the private and public sectors in the UK. It's around about 85% of centres that are accredited to teach English belong to English UK. Our role is to support the language centres with training, advice, international marketing, intelligence, and campaigning for our industry. So very similar to the role that Belta has for you guys. The additional areas where we offer support for students and agents is we have a students' complaint system in place, whereby if a student is unhappy with the product there or course they're experiencing at a member centre, there is a process they can follow. They go through the school, but then ultimately they can refer to us, and there's an independent ombudsman who makes a ruling on the case. It's far and few between. There are peak time used to have 500,000 students coming to the UK to study English, and we'd have a maximum of about 10 cases that would go to the Ombudsman. So it is generally a very good experience students have in the UK. We also have a student emergency support system, which is in place in the event that a school is forced to close, so that the students are not just turfed out onto the street. It is a rare example that it's rare that it happens, but it's good to know that exists just in case it should happen when your students are here. So, our member centres, as I said, we've got 305 of them. They're based all over the UK, so in England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Over 100 different study locations to choose between, and it's the whole spectrum from modern or historic towns and cities, rural centres, centres in boarding schools in the middle of the countryside, coastal towns and cities. The one thing that is they all have in common is they are accredited by the British Council. And Nadia's asking me if I'm changing the slides. So the slide's not changing. I was. Um,
It's now on outbound ELT global perspective.
all right, let me go back. Sorry,
Sorry,
guys.
everyone.
This is what you get when you get over 50. Can't do technology.
There we go. I think this one's
Right,
fine.
so they are all accredited by the British Council. This is the only accreditation scheme that is focused on English language programs in the UK. And it covers sort of five main areas. We'll give you a helpful sort of web page later on. So looking at the actual statistics, the latest global picture we have is for 2003. Bonnard worked with the main educator associations, the main eight agent educator associations, and their report is published in September each year. So it's looking back, so it's already quite out of date. But for the 2024 report shows that in 2023, 1.1 million students traveled overseas to study an English language program, studying 8.5 million weeks. Of those students, Brazil was the second largest sender, second only to Colombia. Looking at the host destinations, the UK was the most popular, hosting 37% of all of the ELT students, but it had a lower proportion of hosting the student weeks. We were third place for student weeks. And that is because of the differences in the kind of programs and products that we specialize in. The UK has a much more varied portfolio. So around about 50% of the students that come to the UK are junior students, which is similar to proportion to those in Ireland and Malta. Looking at Canada and the States, it's much more dominated by adult learners, and adult learners, by definition, tend to stay for longer course lengths, which is why we have the most number of students, but not as many student weeks as the Canada or the US. So we host 37% of, sorry, 17% of all of the student weeks, but from Brazil, we only host 9% of the outbound student weeks from Brazil. So it's a much lower market share from Brazil. If you want the full report, you can download it, and I've given you the QR code from the Bonnard website. They said they don't have the data on what 2024 is or 2025 will be like. But at our members conference just recently, where we were presenting our 24 statistics, Bonnard did a projection as to what it's likely to look like. Generally, you'll see that it looks like we are past the post-pandemic, cannot say that, post-pandemic boom. So the bounce back from students not being able to travel during the pandemic is kind of now over and it's settled down into normality. And it will not likely reach the levels it did prior to the pandemic because of changes globally, which I'll show on the next slide. One thing that is noticeable is the blue chart is showing student weeks and the yellow chart is showing student numbers. You'll see that the decrease is stronger for the predicted decrease in student weeks is stronger, and it's to do with the changes in the course length. So now, as people are becoming more cost conscious, they are tending to come for shorter course durations. So student numbers are dipping, but student weeks are dipping at a faster rate. But it is a new world that we're working in. It's very different to pre-pandemic, and factors that are influencing student flow, and this is particular English language student flow, is changes in market. So the level of English in a lot of different host destinations has improved. Technology is an alternative to coming and studying face to face. It's not the same, but it's a real competition. That the age of learners is tending to get younger, and there's been an increasing proportion across all markets of the junior segment. There's a greater price sensitivity in markets, which again is affecting course durations. Within both the agent and educator sectors, it's reaching maturity. There's been consolidation, so growth of chains, consolidation, the type of products offered as well. And the biggie, which is outside all of our control, is government policies and the way that impacts on immigration policies, public sentiment, student sentiment, and that in itself is hugely impacting student flows across all destinations. The other thing that we can't tell, because Bonnard doesn't collect the data from them, is the displacement of courses to newer host destinations. So there's the rise of the Philippines, Dubai, and Malaysia as alternative destinations, which is a different product, a lower standard of English, but it's especially for young learners within Asia, they've sort of been a rise in popularity as sort of the first experience getting closer to home. So that's the bigger background. This is what so English UK's own statistics from our English language centres in the UK tell us about 2024 and the first quarter of 2025. So we have two different statistical schemes. The annual student statistics report, which is compulsory for all members of the association to supply data on an annual basis. So it's comprehensive and covers all 309 member centres, but it's always published in May and it's looking at the year before. The second scheme is our quarterly reports, our quick cohort, which it's voluntary for members to participate in. 126 members are in this year, which means it's 40% of the sector representing 58% of the student weeks. So it's pretty indicative of what is likely to be happening. And the data in the quarterly scheme is much more detailed, so you can look at patterns throughout the year. So looking at the sort of the membership as a whole, so I said English UK is split between private sector and state sector members, public sector members. The majority, because of restructuring the markets and the nature of state sector organisations, our membership is increasingly moving towards private sector. When we first became English UK, it was about 1/4 were public government institutions, 2 3/4 were private sector. Now, it is only 28 of the members are state sector. The remaining are privately owned companies. But it's a huge spectrum. The chart on the left, not very good at left and right, shows that 195 of them, so nearly 2/3, are year-round language centres. But then there is a proportion of executive centres, the centres that focus just on business English, home tuition providers where you can study in the teacher's house, pathway providers, other training providers where they might offer English language, but it might also be, for example, it's like the Bayswater example, where they have marketing courses. And there are quite a large proportion that are specialist young learner centres. So 50 of the 300 plus are open only as young learner centres. The majority of those are multi-centres. So it's those operations where they could run up to sort of 10, 15 centres in the summer. And the single centre is where they just have one centre. So the variety of types of provider, there's also a variety of size of provider. And the chart on the right-hand side shows you the size of the provider. So around a third of the members teach less than 1,000 student weeks a year, which doesn't sound very much, but if you think of maybe just a seasonal provider with one centre, you've only got a short term time frame that you're open. Another third teach between 1,000 and 3,500 student weeks a year. The final third are those which have a much bigger student population, where the range there is between 3,500 and 10,000 plus a year. The top, I think it's 10 members, account for sort of over 15% of the membership student weeks. So there's a huge variety of types of provider. And the location, I told you they're distributed all over the UK, and they really are. But there is a strong concentration of members in the traditional, what we think of destinations of London, Bournemouth, Brighton, Cambridge. But there is a widespread outside of those areas as well. And this chart shows you the number of members and the percentage of student weeks that are taught by the members in that area. So although you can see 70 members are based in London, they account for about a quarter of all of the student weeks that are hosted in the UK. Whereas there are 46 members in the southwest, that's talking right down into Cornwall, Devon, south of Bournemouth, and they account for 13% of the student weeks. One of the charts I'll show you later will show you the distribution of Brazilian students and how that compares to this. So looking at the annual statistics, in 2024, Brazil was the 6th largest market. I'm just going to hide your faces. So our members as a whole taught 351,000 students from 120 plus different source markets. Of those, the majority were on full-time courses, and we only count face-to-face courses, really. We don't really look at out-of-country tuition. That's not covered by the accreditation scheme. So it's only provisional figures we have for online tuitions. This is all face-to-face. But only 14,000 of the 350 studied part-time. The rest were full-time students. As usual, student weeks surpassed the 1 million student week rate. Juniors were 62% of all students, and their average stay was 1.9 student weeks. But adults still very much dominate in terms of student volume. They counted for 67% of student weeks. So the overall patterns are very similar to what it has always been. But what is different is there has been much more volatility in the top markets, the rankings of the top markets, and in the performance of each of the individual member centres. The top 20 markets are our usual ones. As I said, Brazil ranks 6th. 85% of the students and a similar number of the student weeks come from these top 20 markets. So although we have 120 countries, it is widely concentrated within these markets. Of the top 20, 9 saw a year-on-year increase, 11 saw a year-on-year decrease. The biggest growth was in China, Colombia, and Turkey. In context, Brazil sent 13,500 of the 350,000 students, so about 10%, and they studied 55,000 student weeks. So the average length of stay of a Brazilian student was 4 weeks compared to 3.4 weeks for all nationalities. This is a stable number. It's the same length of stay as Brazilians had in 2023. What is noticeable is that the number of weeks decreased. Brazilian students were down by about 8% and student numbers down by 8.7% on the previous year. So it was weaker for Brazil last year than in 2023. But that is because Brazil had an absolutely bumper year in 2024. So it still reached 99% of the volume that it was sending in 2019. So the number of students that came last year is the same as the number of students that came from Brazil pre-pandemic. And it's a lot stronger than the market average. What is noticeable is when we go into quick and we look at the performance over the quarters in the year, Q1 and Q3 were very strong for Brazil. So you sent more students than you did pre-pandemic. It weakened in Q2 and then slowed down a lot more in Q4. So I've also done a little chart comparing the breakdown across the quarters, and it's pretty as you would expect. The bulk of student weeks, all of the quick, it's always student weeks. The bulk of student weeks for both all markets and for Brazil come in Q3 in our summer. What is different is that the Brazilian numbers are slightly more even across the year. So Brazil, although 37% of Brazilian student weeks come in Q3, that's 6% lower than the market average, which is at 43%. And there is much more stability in the number of adult student weeks throughout the year. Yellow is showing the number of adult student weeks. So you'll see that for Brazil, apart from in Q4, it's around the 8 to 9,000 mark, whereas for across all markets, there's a much stronger peak in Q3. Juniors is the reverse in that for Brazil, junior student weeks are very much concentrated in Q3. So 75% of all junior courses, students come to the UK in Q3. For Brazil, it's even more concentrated. It's 78% of all juniors were in the UK in Q3. Oops. Looking at course type breakdowns, unsurprisingly, our data sort of reflects the information that the Belta SEAL research showed. So, oops, I keep clicking into the wrong screen. From the Belta SEAL research, which looks at all programs, not just English language, the most popular programs sold by Belta agents were language courses and teen vacation. And then professional courses are sort of they're reaching down to number 5 for looking at English language courses with our members. By far, the most popular course type in every quarter was general English for adults. The second most popular course type was either general English for juniors in quarters 1 and 2, or for summer camps for juniors in Q3. Looking at where Brazilians came in 2024, look, 50% came to London. There is spread throughout, but it's very much London, Northern England, and the south and southeast of England are the key destinations, with a smaller proportion in the other parts of the UK. So what do we know about 2025? Well, this is the most recent data that's available. Our voluntary scheme has continued to grow, so we've now got 126 members participating. As I said, 40% of the membership, 60% of the student weeks. In the Q1 period, as a whole, there were 116,000 student weeks, which is a 12% drop on Q1 2024, which is not great, but it's the same level as recovery as we saw in Q4 2024. As within 2024, the source markets and other patterns are typical. So the share of adults to juniors, the proportion that are coming through agents, the proportion that are going direct. But again, much more volatility at the individual member basis and across the individual source markets. There were losses or decreases in most of the top 10 markets. The exception was growth in Turkey and Italy, which means it sort of tempered the decline a little bit. And what that tells us, what we can tell from Brazil in Q1, is that it ranked fourth overall, sending 8,000 student weeks, of which 1,119 are junior, 6,000 are adults. It recorded the second largest year-on-year drop amongst the 20 markets, which meant it fell from being in second position to fourth most important market. But it's a similar story to last year. Although the numbers reduced, Brazil performed better than the average market. So its recovery was 81%, but across all markets, recovery was 71%. So the numbers are not as good as they were, but they're still better than the market average. It was the third most popular, most prevalent country for adult courses behind Turkey and Saudi Arabia, and the fourth largest source market for juniors behind Italy, Spain, and Argentina. Similar to year round, the most popular study destinations were London, Northern England, and South East England. What is noticeable is the concentration of agent bookings. So 80, is this from my Argentine? I'm just wondering with the notes. Sorry, ignore me there because I think I was just reading my notes from what I put for Argentina. Sorry. So that is basically the sum of the statistical picture of where we're at. So Brazil is doing well, not as well as it was post-pandemic, but better than a lot of other markets. But there is definitely a lot of room for growth. It is still the UK only hosts 8% of Brazil's outbound students for English language courses. I'm going to hand over to Nadia, unless anybody's got any comments or questions, if you're still alive.
I'd be grateful if there are a couple of questions. I'm just typing something out to a colleague. So give me 2 minutes.
So, do the statistics match with what you were expecting? I'll ask you guys a question.
I believe so. Um, it's good to see that we are top five, top four, as usual here in the UK. We always discuss here in Brazil when should we promote new destinations, new cities, new regions, whatever. It's always a daily question, in our marketing. And then at the end of the line, we always see that overall speaking, Brazilians are quite cliche. It's really hard to change an overall mind of the most popular destinations and everything. That's when we see in the UK 50% of people coming to London and outbound. So it's really hard for us to introduce new ideas all the time, but it's good to see this, with the actual data as well, and also keep remembering people that there is a lot out there. not only this and that destination or city and whatever, But usually, I really, if I can try to foresee anything, I don't see any big movement to change the main destinations, the main programs, the main cities that are more popular here because the market, I always mention it's quite mature,
Yeah,
with the agencies in Brazil. So we do sell all kinds of programs and destinations for a long time. That's why, and the volume of business is quite interesting overall speaking. And despite we as agents always fighting to to have a very good sales month or everything, but overall speaking, there's a lot of business in Brazil. So I don't really see any big shifts, but more of the same.
yeah.
Usually quite steady somehow at least. We
Let's
have
see if we
seen
can
a
get 1% more though. 1% of the market share.
Yeah, we always want that, but we saw a movement in numbers a bit larger after the pandemics, as your data also shows. But we believe that we are kind of in a stable time of the market at this point, So
Yeah.
we just keep hoping that no bigger problem around the world raises, in some kind of war here and there or something.
Indeed,
So we keep our fingers crossed for that. And then,
very
once
much.
peace is out there, we just keep happening, we
Yeah.
just keep doing our job. So that's what I can see an overall picture.
I'm going to pass over to Nadia, and she's going to run through sort of the latest visa updates and if you've got any questions for her around sort of visas in the UK.
Indeed. Thank you, Ros. Yeah, so we obviously um, inform agents and members as well anytime there are changes in immigration rules, but I just thought I'd recap briefly what's happened recently. Um, the most recent changes were introduced in March. Not, well, I'd say they don't really apply to those coming to study English in the UK, other than one little formal change which they've made in the sort of document, but in practice it's always been happening anyway for some time already. It's to do with how a caseworker assesses the intention of a student to come and study English if they're coming for longer than 6 months. And as I said, that's been happening for some time already, and it was just putting it formally in the guidance. The other changes do not apply because it all relates to either the student visa or the graduate route. What does affect short-term study visa students, though, is the removal of vignettes. It affects them positively, however, I'd say, rather than anything for you to worry about, because it means that those people who would have left their passports at the VAC before to apply for their visa do not have to do that from if they're applying from the 15th of July. So they will go into the VAC to submit their biometrics and their application and other documents, but they take their passport back with them after their appointment. And then when the visa is granted, they will receive an email notification that will confirm whether they've had the visa and what category. And then they'll be told about their e-visa, which can only be accessed with an UKVI account. That UKVI account is separate to the account that they use to apply for a visa. Slightly complicated, but so far I think there haven't been too many issues. But if you are aware of any issues, please obviously let me know. You may have heard of the immigration white paper that was published in May. I will reassure you that it doesn't mean anything is changing immediately or will change. It's just the government saying out loud, I suppose, what they're concerned about and what they'd like to see change. But we don't have any information exactly on what will change and when. So for now, we'll just keep going as we are. Obviously, all centres want to only teach students who genuinely intend to study English. So you may sometimes find that the schools are asking a few more questions, but that is only to help the student at the time when they are actually filling in the application form. I think we can go to the next slide, Ross. Excellent. So the biggest recent change for you, most of you, would be the ETA, the Electronic Travel Authorization. It was first introduced back in November 2023 for applicants from Qatar, was it Kuwait, one or the other. But since the 8th of January this year, it's applied to nationals from most other countries bar European countries. And for European countries, it came in on the 5th of April. And since that date, everybody has needed to have an ETA at the moment when they are boarding their flight. If when they are boarding, they don't have that, they will be asked to step aside and submit an application. The application itself can take up to about 20 minutes, but UKVI advise to make the application about 3 days ahead of the date of travel, so that you're sure that there are no issues by the time that the students are traveling. In terms of the cost, when it was first introduced, it was at £10 and it is valid for 2 years. The cost has quickly gone up to £16, and the validity of that ETA is still 2 years though. So if you have applied for one in January, it's not before the end of, let's say, December 2027. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. For January 2028 that you'll have to start worrying about getting a new one. So how to apply? I don't know if many of you have had experience of it yet. So there's an app which is most easy to use, I think, compared to the online application. But the problem is if you're trying to help someone who's not present with you face to face, the online application form is easier because you need to be uploading passport pictures and photo of the applicant. So the online is there to be used if you are, especially for a group, for example. But if you are doing it for yourself or with someone who's standing next to you, the app is definitely easiest. There are guides available on that website, and it's quite in simple English. So there shouldn't be any problem. When we did the webinar for agents in Argentina, there were quite a few questions about the cost of applications, because it would appear that there were links available for an online application, but that wasn't through gov.uk. And the cost was a lot more, about £70 or something like that. It turns out that although you're paying more, you're still getting the actual ETA, which is reassuring. But if you haven't received any sort of formal confirmation that either you've submitted an application or that you have received an ETA, I was in touch with UKVI, and there is a web chat on the gov.uk page that you could access. And I'll see if I can find it in a bit, and I'll post it in the chat. The web chat is very helpful, actually, and it is manned by people. It is not a chatbot, although it might start as a chatbot, but then humans do respond to it, and they will let you know whether an ETA has already been submitted in the name of the person or the passport number, and they'll be able to confirm the validity as well.
The general advice is just use the link, the government official links. That will get you the cheapest cost, and you're guaranteed, it's the route. If by mistake somebody happens to click on one of these non-official links, most of them appear to be linked to the government site. So it's not that the money is just going down the drain. They will probably get the letter. It's just going to cost more money. But if you're in any doubt, contact UK Gov through the chatbot in
Yeah, I've just
the
posted it in the chat
official
group that there should
channels, and they'll
be
be
a
able to
link.
confirm whether the application did appear. We had some agents who were worried because they hadn't heard back,
Mm.
and they had a group sort of leaving quite soon, and they were going to get to the airport and then wouldn't know whether they could travel or not.
I know there are questions in. I think that's the end of my slides, isn't it, Ross?
Yeah. So any
Yes.
questions around visas or anything so far? Oops.
Yeah, I know there's Fabiana. I can see in the chat. I'd like to ask about the payment of visa fees. Normally, we have problems with payments. Is that from the gov.uk website, Fabiana, or that's potentially the other links that we were talking about? And I wonder whether there is also something to do with the provider of the credit card. I don't know if that's something that we need to look into, isn't it? So maybe Fabia, if it's an issue that a few of you have experienced, can you maybe try to understand where the problem is, or if there's anything in common that we can sort of then try to look into, if that makes sense. Give me 1 second. I've got somebody at the door.
So I'm going to type Nadia's email address here. It's quite straightforward. And although we can't look at sort of individual cases, if there's sort of a pattern or a series, it's happening for a number of agents that when we're trying to put payment through with this bank, this credit card is failing, we can then flag it and then get UKVI to verify if there's a problem or what it is that needs to be changed. Similarly, if you are experiencing sort of issues with maybe a visa refusal or the like, we try to track trends so that we can then lobby for if there's training that's needed or changes in the guidance. And the Nadia is sort of the one who collates this information and then sort of liaises with the UKVI here. Nadia, you back?
I am, yes. So yes, thank you for
This,
that. I think I'll just go with the other questions now, if
yep.
that's okay. Yeah.
Shall I read it to you?
No, yeah, I can see it. I don't know if all you on the call can see it as well. It says about the new e-visa and the student who's received a vignette. So at the moment, students are receiving both the vignette, which is only a visa to enter the UK. It's not the actual visa given for the duration that the student applied for. If you look carefully, you'll see the dates are there are only 90 days from the start to the end date on that vignette. What the student should be looking at is the UKVI account that will have all the information, including the dates by which the visa starts, the end date of the visa, and that information will also be available to the provider when you give a share code. And that is what all providers need to check now. They wouldn't necessarily be asking about the passport to see what information is in there. They should only check the UKVI account. So yeah, it is important that check that information on the e-visa, especially make sure that the passport number and the names are correct, because if it isn't, there might be issues at the airport.
I just thought another question that we had come up was exactly related to that. So, quite often Latin American students may have two passports. They might have their Brazilian one, or they might
Mm.
have, say, an Italian one. And it's making sure that if you are traveling, you've got the ETA or the visa for the correct passport,
Mm.
because you can't switch it over once it's been issued in one passport. You can get it one ETA for each passport, but you can't use the wrong passport's one. Um,
Fabian, I see you say there are 80% of payment that don't work. That's worrying in a way, but I think we need to understand whether that is across all agencies or just something that you've experienced. Um, but obviously, if it is an issue with UKVI, I'd happily take this forward to them. But I just need some examples, for example, um, to share with them. So if you can take a screenshot of the next, or if you already have that, please share it with me. If not, the next time you experience a failure of that payment, take a screenshot and then email it to me. I'll then be able to take it to UKVI. Yeah, anything else? Yeah, last time we didn't have time to go through those slides, isn't
no,
it? So,
so
yeah.
I've just put up
Yeah.
a handful of useful resources, which most of these will be familiar to all of you guys. So, to help you find the right English UK member, there are sort of three resources. Use the member directory, which lists who is accredited and who is a member of English UK. You can always check that's online, it's up to date. You can use the course finder, which is a signposting tool that lists all of the language programs at the different centres, and you can filter by course type, by location, by class size. You can look, for example, for English for pilots or English for diplomats, and then it will just pull out the centres that offer that kind of program. If you're starting to work with a new partner or you want some reassurance, you can go onto the British Council website and you can actually read the inspection reports and see it's very transparent. Find out whether there are any areas of concern. If there were, they won't have, if it was too big a concern, they wouldn't be accredited. You can't, they have to resolve these, but it will tell you if there are areas where they've been asked for improvement, and then they'll go back and check that this has been implemented. And if you are looking to work with English language centres, Accreditation UK is the only centre the only scheme that accredits English language centres. So look out for the English UK member logo or the Accreditation UK logo when you're meeting members at websites. The
You're looking for the member accreditation
No, sorry,
logo.
it's just come back there. Yeah,
Yeah.
just like we run our own events, so we attend a lot of industry events. So I was over for Alfie Brazil early in the year. We have a couple of our own events. In September, we do an online study world, um, which by its nature is quite convenient if you just want to reach out and meet some new partners without investing the time to come to the UK. Or it's useful if you want to connect with other staff at the centre. Because it's on Zoom, you can ask them to perhaps bring in the curriculum manager or the homestay organizer if you want some reassurance about particular areas during your meetings. Our face-to-face event for the first time in 20 years is going back to Brighton. So in January 26 to 28, we're hosting a B2B workshop in Brighton at the Hilton Metropole. It's the English UK events. The biggest differential between our events and the commercial operators is they are not commercially driven. It is to promote accredited centres to agents around the world. To attend, the educators must be accredited. That is not true for ISEF or for Alfie events. So you know that whoever you meet at the event will be accredited. They are deliberately human-sized, so it has around about 80 schools to 120, 150 agents. So the idea is that it's small enough that you can meet people multiple times and actually establish your relationships. And Brighton, if you haven't been, it's a nice opportunity to see a little bit of a different part of the UK, which is actually very easy to get to from London. It's by the sea, famous for its vibrant culture, beaches, architectural, numerous attractions. The event is 2 days of meetings and then networking events, this sort of standard package. Because it's limited places and a smaller size, if you are interested in going, I would recommend that you apply as soon as possible because there will be quotas set on different markets. It's also a good opportunity for you when you're over to join a fam trip, and a number of the members usually run fam trips around the time of the event. We have a partner agency scheme, which Nadia actually manages. Nadia, do you want to talk through it?
I can. Um, yeah, so it is for agencies like yourselves who've worked with member centres for a number of years already. You get that nice little logo that you can use on your website and your email signature and brochures or wherever you want to use it. There's also a listing on our website, and we know that individuals who call us asking for a language course will eventually use, because we do sort of recommend that they talk not just to the schools, but sometimes to an agent, because you are best placed to advise on location or country for as well sometimes. And actually, recently I did speak to someone, and I did suggest that they speak to agents in Brazil because they were looking to come to the UK to learn English and do some work experience. Um, and what we do for agents is, other than the directory and the logo, is regular newsletters and webinars like this. And especially when there are changes to immigration rules, we do put on webinars and we then invite agents to attend. And as I said, priority access to
Oh,
our
sorry.
study world events next. And that's it.
So basically, we're here to try and help you guys promote the UK. It's, um, that's our contact details. Feel free to reach out to us. Anyone who is coming over, I think there's 25 or so agents that are coming over for Alfie UK and London in September. We'll both be there in person. I'm there on one day, Nadia's there the next to come and say hello. Um, and if you want to follow English UK on social media, we have a LinkedIn page, an Instagram page, and we've started to revitalize, I think, the Facebook page as well. And that's it from us for now. But feel free to
If you have
speak,
any,
say hello,
if you
or
have
any
any questions
comments.
now, obviously, if not, email about anything. Sometimes problems with schools, issues with what did I have recently? That was an odd one. But anyway, anything that you think English UK can help, we'll try to assist. You know? Especially sometimes if you have difficulties with schools. We before it gets to a complaint, we do try to take the problem away from it and talk to the school, make sure that we can reach a solution that works for everyone. I think is the diplomatic way of saying how we help.
Thank you, guys. Very good. It's good to touch the visa issue as well. and to see you guys are also available to help us talking to schools if needed. But overall speaking, the business and the relationship with the UK institution has been very stable over the years, and that's why we see numbers always, in a good pattern and everything. So. Marie Glenn is quite nervous here because she wants
Do
you
a
to
photo.
yes, we need to do our photo now. You can stop
Please
sharing
stop
your
sharing,
QR
Ross.
codes, and then
Mm.
we're going to share our faces to everybody now. Oh, thank you once again. I'll see you guys over in July for the presentation we're gonna do to your members. It's always good for us to show the more information from the Belta survey. And of course, we'll see you in London as well for Alfie and
And
other.
hopefully
So
see some of you in Brighton next year as well.
yeah, let's work on that as well. Yeah, good.
Nice seeing you.
So let's go.
Yep.
You done. Bye bye. Busy here? Did you? Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Well,
Okay. Lovely to
thank
Thank
see
you,
you
you.
guys.
all.
Bye.